Are we possibly in the worst Overwatch? Do that again.
Try that one again.
Are we possibly in the worst meta Overwatch has ever seen? Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome to the channel. I'm Stylosa and I'm joined by the glorious...
One amongst many, yes, I'm here too. Every single meta is the worst meta. Everyone has called it, and this one, it might be, honestly, the worst meta. That we might be going from bad to worse to worse. Who knows? Is it a downward slope? Are we just overreacting though? Are we spoilt? Sty, what's going on?
Like, Beyblade's the worst meta, Mercy Moth meta is the worst meta, Dive is the worst meta, Goats is the worst meta. But the thing is now, we've got the power of experience behind us. We've got years behind us now with this game. So we can look back and we can, I think, objectively look at the metas and go, actually, is this the worst meta? Now, I've got a problem here because I enjoy playing Sigma. I'm not really the greatest fan of playing an Orisa, but I'll play it if I have to. So for the tank meta, it's Orisa or Sigma, basically. If I can get Sigma, I'll kind of enjoy playing him. But then if I don't get an Orisa with me, and it's like a hog or somebody just rebelling against the fact that they don't want to play Orisa, then I'm sort of like, I best play Orisa, at which point they instantly swap to Sigma. And it's like, so tank meta-wise, Sigma, for me personally, it's kind of okay, right? It's not too bad. But the issue is, it's the barriers. It's absolutely the barriers stopping DPS doing anything. And there's been a lot of memes getting thrown around recently like, Overwatch, is it actually an FPS game anymore? What's going on with Overwatch? All these barriers. And what are barriers good at? Well, blocking hit scan damage, and that's kind of what FPS games are about.
It's part of why I've gone to like Borderlands 3 to actually shoot something rather than spray a mist at things.
Yeah, well, I was playing COD as well. COD was quite interesting to shoot stuff.
Bits of damage, like it really starts driving you up the wall. And I think the issue that I have with this meta is I don't feel fulfilled as a player. Like you mentioned, Sigma's fun to play. Sigma feels fulfilling to play because he's slightly overpowered. He's got a toolkit for everything. He's just really good.
I think he's overtuned.
Yeah, he's got. He has that problem where he's got kind of answers for everything, and so that just makes him really good in all these situations. Baptiste is in meta. He's fun to play. I like shooting at people with Baptiste. I like using the immortality field. That's all really cool. And then you have Moira, who is powerful, and like it's fun to play Moira at times when it's like, man, I'm looking at the team and I need more healing, like we need tons and tons of healing. I know, I'll play Moira and then I can keep everyone alive. But when it's just like every single game is just playing Moira over and over and over and over, it's just like, well, all I'm doing is spraying mist at people and holding right mouse button vaguely in the direction of the enemy team. That's not fulfilling. And the DPS options, well, you've got Doomfist, who I'm sure is a crack to play. I'm sure he's hugely fun to play. But
yeah.
Then you got Reaper, okay, yeah, he can be fun, but again, he's like fun in small doses. Symmetra, fun in small doses. I don't want to play Symmetra forever because all I'm doing is charging up a beam on a barrier and holding that mouse button. Mei, fun in small doses for me. Again, it's that just spraying mists at people. I don't want to spray things at people, Sty. I want to shoot people.
You want to spray bullets at people.
Exactly.
This is the problem. Like people, you get the absolute rebels without a cause, although they do have a cause because their cause is they want to play a hero that they just want to play. So we've got barriers everywhere. So basically, we get 2-2-2. It comes out. Everyone's like, okay, we've got roll lock. This is great. But then we get Sigma. Then Sigma enables a double barrier meta. Now the problem is with 2-2-2, we get increased queue times for the DPS players. Now, if you are a Genji player or a Tracer player, and I'm going to use these two very specifically because, Sigma's quite good against them, and you're going to use them, and that's what you want to play. You're going to sit there in your 10-minute plus queue, and you get into the game. You lock in your Tracer, you lock in your Genji, you're loving life, it's great. You get down to the enemy team and you see they've got an Orisa. All right, okay, fine. We'll just ignore the Orisa. But look at this. They've got a Sigma as well. And they've got a Moira. Now, we've got a bit of a problem. Especially if they've also got a Mei, because Mei's not exactly very nice to play with if you're Genji or Tracer as well. But ignore their DPS. Just think of their tanks, their Sigma and their Moira as a support. You can't really do too much against them. You've basically got two heroes that counter you anyway, so you're kind of screwed. So what do? Well, I'm just going to carry on playing Tracer or Genji. I don't care, because that's what I've come to play. And then you get destroyed. And this is sort of the same old problem we had even without roll queue and roll lock, where you just would get people that want to go into the game and play a hero regardless. But now, I think it's sort of amplified in a few ways because it's almost like you're trying to rebel against the system. It's like, look, I want to play Ashe today, but Ashe might be absolutely terrible because there's all these barriers in my face and I can't do anything. But I don't care. I want to play Ashe. And there'll be those moments where you get those awesome kills with Ashe and you're like, wow, that was a beautiful shot. But then it doesn't really offset the fact that you're not doing anything in most of the fights and you should have just played Doomfist so you can punch through the barriers. or Meg or Reaper or
But
Symmetra
this isn't a new
or Bastion.
problem either. And like what you're referencing isn't a new phenomenon. But what's I think is the bigger problem is when you had Goats meta, for example, we had this period of time where even at like where I generally play, which is like the Diamond Masters border, which is hell incarnate at times, but it's like people weren't playing Goats every single game in that time.
No.
Like a lot of people were actively rebelling against playing Goats. They did not want to play Goats. But with this meta, it feels like people play more towards this meta because it is kind of so... Like, Goats is a difficult comp to play, playing heroes that people don't really want to play, but people like playing Doomfist, people like feeling powerful playing Symmetra, people are okay feeling powerful playing stuff like Moira. And so you just end up getting kind of pushed onto these heroes way, way more than it feels like you ever did with Goats, where it felt like there was a big community push to go, no, let's not play that, let's play other things. And I do occasionally see like Ryan Zarias and stuff, I do occasionally see like McCree's pop up here and there, but what generally happens is the enemy team will then go to the Orisa Sigma, and then they'll go to like the Baptiste Moira, and then suddenly everything stops dead in its tracks. It's like that comp is so powerful, it's so strong, that once the enemy team goes for it, you kind of have to go for it or you're just going to take the loss. Like, it's very difficult to break it when you aren't playing towards that meta. And I think that's the real issue. Like, a badly played Goats comp can lose to stuff like Junkrat, to lose to Reapers, lose to Doomfists at times. It can lose to various things. But this comp, it's just so simple to get it working that it's very difficult to beat it without playing the mirror, without playing something very similar to it. And that, I think, is where we get into the issue of this meta might be one of the worst that we've had, because it is so strongly built around, you've got to play this. It's similar to what we had with the Moth Mercy meta, right? Where if the enemy team had Mercy, you just had to have Mercy as well. And that's the real issue, I think.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Like, it's just the simplicity of setup and the way you can just... I mean, like, I would be lying if I said I didn't sit there laughing, rubbing my hands together when I go into a comp game and we've actually got like the meta tanks and supports, let's say, and I look at the enemy team and they've literally got Hammond and Zarya as a tank. I'm like, well, you've lost. And then they lose because they can't literally stop any damage smashing into their team. And on one hand, yeah, okay, it's funny because you know you're going to win. But on the other hand, those players might be good at those heroes, but there actually is no way to counter that tank comp with a different tank comp. It has to be the mirror comp, and then you're almost relying on the rest of your team to sort of pull it out of the bag to do something extraordinary, which again is the other issue we've got with these heroes, especially with Moira. Moira isn't really a carry hero. In fact, Moira is a hero that has... if we look at impact in terms of like... I mean, maybe you could use a bell curve as an example. It's not a great example, but Moira's impact is not at the top of this curve. Moira is sort of... She has very high... Oh, she doesn't really... I don't know how to phrase it. She has like consistent impact. Yeah, she's got consistent impact.
That's the right word. She's consistent, and she's consistently great. But she's not the kind of hero that you can, like, if you're really, really good at Moira, you will have a significantly better performance than if you are playing, if you have, like, Ana, and the top tier Ana, the best Ana in the world, and the worst Ana in the world, are leagues and leagues and leagues and leagues apart. But the best Moira in the world and the worst Moira in the world, that difference isn't quite as huge. Or I suppose the better example would be the best Moira in the world and your average Moira. Like, the difference isn't as huge. And so you don't have that room to like outplay your enemies quite as much because every Moira is giving a very similar performance. Okay, you're going to have the morons who go, oh, well, I want to play DPS, but I'm going to QS support and pick Moira. And then, they somehow win because Moira can kind of do that. Yeah, it's one of those issues where, and I think this is the issue I run into with this meta, is like, I don't feel like I'm getting better at the game. And for me, that's always been the driving thrust. That's why I keep coming back to it.
Yes.
That's why I want to play more of it. I want to get better at these heroes.
I like that. So I made a video on that where I was speaking about maybe role queue and the whole sort of problem we've got at the moment with people playing off roles when they don't really want to play them, but they're just sort of like, hey, I'm going to play DPS Moira, or I'm just going to play whatever tank, but I'm not really a tank player. I just want a game. I don't want to wait for a very long queue to pop. You end up with players that are not capable of playing those heroes, really, because the fact of the matter is, with Overwatch, if you main a hero, you get really good at that hero, and the higher you get through the ranks, the better you get at that hero because the more time you put on that hero. So if you have to play a different hero, you're typically not as good. So it all comes back down to time again, where you need to play more and more and more to get up to the same level. So we've got this problem at the moment in role queue, which over time will get better. But how long that will take, well, we don't really know. But I want to take us back to the tanks, because I actually have made a video talking about Winston specifically, but I've got the stats for the usage, the pick rate of the tanks, and I was quite surprised, this is across all the ranks as well, that Zarya, Orisa and Reinhardt are actually fairly even. We've got 17% for Zarya, well 17.8% for Zarya, 17.81% for Orisa, and 16.72% for Reinhardt. So Reinhardt and Zarya, we're still seeing that as a combo. And I'd be lying again if I didn't say when I seen a Zarya on my team, I'm like, oh cool, I can play Reinhardt, because I kind of can. But again, if you're playing into an Orisa Sigma, it still isn't ideal and it still can be quite difficult at times. And this is the other thing with Sigma, when you've played a lot of him, and then you go back to playing Reinhardt, you feel like you're not really doing anything with Reinhardt. And I think that is completely just down to the fact that Sigma's new and Reinhardt is one of the original heroes. You can see how the design has changed and it's more proactive. It's like you said, Sigma's got an answer for everything. Reinhardt, well, he doesn't.
I'm sure you've run into this with Overanalyzed. Like, one of the big things when you're trying to coach someone who's playing Reinhardt is you tell them to do less because it's often better. And so Reinhardt runs into that problem where the best option is often just to like either have your shield up or like flick your shield up and down just to like make it last a little bit longer, but it's generally just blocking. Like, you don't want to do fire strikes, you don't want to do charges, you don't want to do any of this active stuff, and so you just kind of end up stuck. And the issue with the current meta is, well, you're kind of stuck taking tons and tons of damage from this Orisa, who's great at doing damage to barriers, from like you're being blocked by a Mei, or you're being punched back by Doomfist, or you're being hit by a Reaper, all great at dealing with barriers, and you feel kind of helpless. And when you get those opportunities to sort of play around the meta, like you mentioned, when you get that Zarya, Reinhardt, and maybe you have like a McCree or something as well, and you can, and the enemy team's kind of playing like, I don't know, Orisa and Hog or something, and you can kind of go, oh, well, they don't have that Sigma, okay, maybe you can like run into them a bit more, or they're playing like Rein Zarya as well, and you go, oh, this is kind of a fun game. But the issue I always run into is, at some point, someone's going to go, okay, guys, we're losing, I'm going to play Orisa, you play Sigma, and then we're back to square one again, and we're back to this kind of, and I think the issue I have with this meta, to bring us back to like the meta discussion, is it's just not a satisfying meta to play. And Goats kind of had this issue where you like, you know, you start playing tanks all the time, but even then, like, I felt like I was getting better at Zarya, or I felt like I could play, you know, Ana or Zen, and I was getting better at those heroes. But in this meta, I just feel like I'm kind of filling the role, like I'm just playing the part and just doing what I need to do on Moira, spraying heals on people, putting out heal orbs as needed, or Baptiste throwing down immortality fields and occasionally shooting at people, but I'm not developing, I'm not growing as a player, and that growth is what we want as a player base, I'm sure. Like, that's how you have a long time healthy game, not in a game where you just stagnate, where you can't grow, where you can't develop.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because this is the first meta in a forced framework of 2-2-2 that we've got, which again goes back to the idea of it is actually easier to run the meta comp because you know you've got 2 tanks, 2 DPS and 2 support, and you're limited by the heroes that each role can select, which does push you easier into like that type of whatever the meta is. But again, it just always comes back to it is so easy to play this meta. It is very easy to get high impact. Now, I'm sure as time goes on, there will be little nuances. I mean, I've noticed through playing Sigma, if I'm playing against the Sigma, and I probably am playing against the Sigma because he's in like every game, but if you're playing against him and you are the Sigma, and they're just spamming their rock into your barrier, it's like, what's this guy doing? Like, he's clearly not a very good Sigma, but obviously he's still getting value because he's still deploying his barrier, he's still throwing his orbs around and all of that stuff. But there are little gaps where you look for the Orisa halt, so as she halts, you throw your rock straight into the halt. It's only a minor thing, it's not a high skill thing, but it's something that starts differentiating the average Sigma from a better Sigma. But I totally agree, and I think this is honestly the issue with the meta, and I'm glad we've had this discussion because it's really highlighted it to me, is that it's just so straightforward to play. And it's, I mean, again, I'd be lying if I said when I'm playing Moira, sometimes I just pick support because I just want to chill, but this isn't a competitive game, and I'm just like, yeah, I'm going to play Moira, and I'm just chilling. Wait, what? I shouldn't be chilling? You know what I mean? What the hell?
Yeah, you should be Naruto running around, dodging all kinds of interesting things, making cool decisions, and making exciting decisions. Moira should be a choice. Like, to me, Moira is, like, I often see heroes as tools, like resources to use, and Moira to me is like, man, they're doing like tons of AoE damage, for example. We need just lots and lots and lots of healing, and we need survivability as well. Like, if there's a Doomfist or something causing problems for me on whatever hero I'm playing, Moira is a good choice to go, okay, well, that will help me survive against stuff like Doomfist or any kind of backline dive. So that's kind of the toolset that I see Moira as part of. When she becomes the sort of the fundamental part of the meta, it's just all about, well, just put out as much healing as you can. And Moira and Baptiste, currently they put out a huge amount of healing. There's no big wombo combo ults being used because, you know, those heroes are falling out of favor. Everything's kind of super survivable at the moment as well, so it's very hard to get sort of value out of those. You don't need the Zenyatta anymore, you don't need the Lucio anymore. Moira, Baptiste are enough, and as a result, your job as a support at the moment is just to pump out healing. Your job as a DPS, if you're not playing the Doomfist, is just to either like wall or just to be like the source of huge amounts of damage on barriers and put pressure on tanks, as like Symmetra or Reaper or even like Hanzo, for example. Just throw arrows at them, just throw damage at them, maybe you get a pick, maybe you get to high charge, and then you kill everyone, right? And it's just this kind of, the Doomfist players are having fun, the Sigma players are having fun, but I think those are the only two that are really enjoying this. And you ask any tank player, like I'm sure there are people out there who love playing Orisa, but he's playing Orisa I think every single game that kind of does it for me, where I know what my experience if I'm playing Orisa is going to be, which is I'm going to put down the barrier, hold left mouse button onto the enemy barrier, and fire holts above their barrier. And that's kind of my job. And there's some interesting choices you can make and interesting things you can do with Orisa, but it's not exciting to do every time.
I think Sigma, Doomfist, and Moira get to play their heroes to the full potential in this meta. Everybody else doesn't, and that's the problem. Like you said, DPS is basically firing into a barrier, and that's not really fun. And I don't think that's ever been fun, and I think that's a big problem. I don't know, man. I think, like, is this the worst meta? That's always going to be a difficult question to ask. It's probably the most boring meta, the most straightforward, the most easy, the most brainless, the most, like... Yeah, it's just, I don't know, it just needs spicing up, and we don't really have the... You can't do that through playing a crazy comp against the meta comp. This can only really be fixed in my mind through balance changes, and Blizzard really need to go back and start looking at some of the changes they made, which were for 3-3 and GOATS comps, which just simply don't work in a 2-2-2 world. And I think barriers need to be looked at.
Yeah, I just hope they don't go in and just nerf everything, because that's how you end up in this situation. Like, they need to have an idea of what they want to achieve. Where do they want the game to go? What do they want it to look like? I've talked about this before, the idea of direction. The idea of, like, where do we want the game to go? What do we want it to play like? What does a game of Overwatch actually look like when you picture it in your mind? Is it just shooting at barriers all day? Probably not. How do they fix this? That's up to them. But I think going in and like, oh, well, we'll nerf Sigma to the ground, and we'll nerf Orisa, and we'll nerf Symmetra, and that will fix the problem. I think if they do that, we'll just end up in the next terrible meta. We'll just end up in the next position where people just are stuck playing heroes they don't want to play. Like,
well, I think if you nerf Sigma, then just Roadhog comes back with Orisa. I think that's all that happens there, really. I don't know. It's weird. It's so weird. Anyway, guys, let us know what you think about this in the comments below. Go into as much detail as you can. Do you enjoy the meta? Do you think it's the worst meta? Or if you don't, which meta do you think is the worst? Let us know. I've been Stylosa, guys. You can follow me on Twitter, which is @Stylosa. I'm also @Stylosa on Instagram.
And you can find me on Twitter as well, @1_amongstmany. You can find me on Twitch as well, twitch.tv/1amongstmanytv, where I'm struggling through support life. I'm trying to play as much Baptiste as I can, because at least I have fun playing Baptiste.
No, he is. He's fun. He is really fun, Baptiste. Anyway, we'll catch you guys in the next one. Toodaloo.
See you.